welcome back to the What the Falk podcast as Sunderland look forward to a weekend trip to Wales to face Swansea City. An injury to Tommy Watson and a limp second half performance were rescued by late Patrick Roberts' goal during the week, but one win in the last 8 or 9, whatever it may be. I haven't checked the stats, to be completely honest. I mean, Sunderland could really do with 3 points, and that's the most important thing. But can we get it? Well, to let us know what to expect, we've roped in returning guest, as we always do, Luke from the SwansCast, to ask what's going on at Swansea City. But first and foremost, mate, how are you? Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm all right. Same as you, bit sniffly, bit, the colds are going round, and I think everyone I know has got one at the moment. So, it is what it is. We carry on, I guess, and hopefully they'll clear up by Christmas. But
yeah,
we'll
I don't believe that my body's able to carry as much snot as it has done for the last 11 days, but I guess that means it's nearly Christmas, which is a good thing, I guess, because more football. But I told you about our midweek performance. People will know about it. While we were drawing Bristol City, you were pushing Wayne Rooney closer to that exit door with a win at Plymouth. Good 2-1 win on the South Coast. They're a good home side, as we know. How was the performance? How was the result?
Yeah, you're right to say they're a good home side, because I think a lot of Swans fans saw their last couple of fixtures, which were heavy away defeats, and kind of expected a result, which I was trying to manage that expectation through the podcast platform and be like, look, they've only lost one game at home all season before we went there. So it's not as easy as what it looks like, and sometimes you've got to look into that little bit extra detail and rein in your expectations in the Championship, because I think it's not always as black and white as what those things look like. But it was a good performance, to be honest. I think at the beginning, we maybe weren't in as much control as we wanted. It was a bit of an even game. Plymouth made a bit of a defensive mistake, which allowed us to grab our first goal, took advantage. It was a good finish, But I guess teams at the bottom, that's the sort of thing you've got to take advantage of sometimes to get those results. We then went and scored a second, which was a good worked goal by us. And as we always seem to do, we can't hold on to like a 2-0 lead to be comfortable. There's always a little bit of a twist, and they scored, I think, in the 84th minute or something to give it a little bit of an exciting finish from their perspective, I guess. But we managed to hold on, so I take that result. At the end of the day, I think it's always important, if you don't lose your away games, you can manage to draw even. That's a good foundation then to try and get most of your results at home is always a good saying. So getting an away win is always a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I think the performance makes it 4 games without a defeat since you lost to Leeds, a game which, I'll pretend I didn't watch, but I did, and got very mad at your entire team. Have you saw like a marked improvement since that Leeds game?
I mean, the teams that we've played are not at the same part of the table as Leeds, and the results, they've been all right, do you know what I mean? But the 2 draws, I think, are frustrating that we couldn't get more, especially when we have a performance like what we showed against Leeds. You saw the way that we didn't win that game or ended up losing that game. Some of those traits, I guess, have carried on into those other games, which is also why we haven't got maximum points in all of those games. It's always a lot to ask for maximum points in like 4 games in a row in the Championship, but ultimately we could have done that. We went 2-0 down to Portsmouth. To be fair, in that game, they had 2 postponements beforehand, so they were fresh as anything. Went 2-0 up, so it was good that we came back in that one, but that was at home. So I think it would have been, probably one we would have been targeting for 3 in the normal circumstance. And then the Luton game, I just said Plymouth dropped a clanger for us to go ahead. Ben Cabango dropped a clanger for us, for them to go ahead in that game. And we ended up coming back to get a draw. So it's good that we're coming back into games now after going behind, which in the past we've struggled with. So that's a good string to add to our bow, I guess. But a complete 90-minute performances is what's missing from Swansea, and probably why we're not in a bad place in the table, we're 9th. But I think if we could find that formula for 90 minutes, whether that's, we going behind early on or we conceding late goals, because it seems to be one or the other, and I think we could be so much further up the table, in all honesty. But in terms of what I expected, I think we're in a fair position.
One thing that's really noticeable about your recent form, which is kind of interesting considering you're unbeaten in 4 and actually the results are a little bit better or a bit more consistent, is you haven't really had an ability to keep a clean sheet. And that's not really been a run where you've had like no clean sheets all season. That's become like quite a new thing. You had quite a few clean sheets, minimal goals being let in, but the last 5 games you've let in 2, 3, 4 here and there. You had a decent run of clean sheets prior to that Leeds game, especially at home. Why is it the past few games have seen more goals be conceded?
Well, yeah, early in the season, our defence was being lauded as one of the best in the league. I was sceptical for a long time, saying I thought we were getting away with some teams not being as clinical as they should have been against us, and it didn't. It wasn't like a low defensive like conceded amount. If you didn't really say that very well, the low amount of goals we conceded weren't telling the full story in terms of how many chances we were necessarily conceding. And I credited us with having a good what I called scatter defense, where we often lose the ball and concede opportunities on a transition against a lot of teams in the league. Not necessarily everyone, like the Leeds and all that, maybe not so much the case, but a lot of teams where we dominate the ball, dominate possession, their opportunities come through winning it in an area where they put us under pressure at the right time with a good organized press, which triggers, together, if you like. And then we're out of shape and is a direct counter attack. And quite often that creates opportunities against us. But we were doing well with a scatter defense in those sort of moments where running back towards our own goal, they were doing just about enough to just about stop the goal. There was other occasions where the team fluffed it themselves, but the balance of those two things, I was a bit like, okay, I don't think our defense is as good as what people think from looking at that stat. Now, the longer that went on, I was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to start giving them credit, and they are actually a good defensive unit. And then, as you just mentioned, it's gone kind of the way that I thought it was going to go. So I probably should have stuck to my guns on that one. But I'm not surprised, basically, is what I'm trying to say, based on what I've seen for the season so far. I'm not trying to say we've got a bad defense, but it's probably more fair. We conceded a few more goals in recent games, but also part of that is our goal scoring wasn't very good, whilst our defense was doing well. So, for example, we were going like 8 for 8 or 9 for 9 in terms of goals scored and against, and I was significantly lower than other teams in the league in both categories. We went, I think it was 5 games without scoring. It was over 9 hours in total where we didn't score a goal. And it's hard to kind of pinpoint what's changed, but we have started scoring a few more goals, but also start conceding a few more goals. So I do feel like certain tweaks within the tactics to allow us to be a bit more creative, a bit more attacking, to fix that problem, which was clearly becoming a problem. And obviously, the longer you go without scoring, more the confidence drops down as well. And you don't want to get into that negative cycle. So whatever changes the managers made, I think we'll need little tweaks, here or there in terms of perhaps pushing players up a bit more here or into a different position there. It's probably left us a bit more vulnerable than it was before, and that's probably part of why we're conceding a few more as well. So I think both things go hand in hand, but ultimately it's just getting the balance. I'm not too worried about not keeping clean sheets as long as we can continue to score and do better in that category, because you can keep clean sheets in every game in the league, but if you score the same amount of goals as you concede, you're not really going to get anywhere, I think, above mid-table. So
looking at the form sort of home and away, the results are not that massive, but when you look at it as in where you're at in the home table, you're 17th, 3 wins, 4 draws, 2 defeats. Not too bad, but 17th sounds particularly, compared to other teams, not great. But your away form, you're 7th in the league. Stats can sometimes tell you everything. They can sometimes tell big fat lies. Are Swansea a better side on the road than they are away from home? Sorry, at home.
I wouldn't necessarily say so. I think some of the the home performances, like I'm surprised it was 17th, because I think how many games do you say we've lost at home?
Only 2.
Was it 2? Yeah, so that's Millwall and Leeds. The Millwall game was a smash and grab. The problem is when we're at home, our play style is very heavy possession based. Certain teams will come and just soak that up. And that's always been the way of defending against this sort of style of football. I've seen it for years, I've seen it when we were in the Premier League. It happened all the time. Sometimes I just mentioned how we were struggling to create opportunities and goals earlier in the season. Millwall game probably falls into that period. And yeah, sometimes we just can't break them down as much as we make chances, or we just can't get that goal. And one of our issues this season has been, and not just in those 2 defeats, but other home games and other away games as well, is Bristol City at home and Stoke at home come to mind, and Cardiff at home come to mind. Dominant for 60, 70 minutes of that game. Or I think maybe in Stoke and Bristol it might have just been more the first half. But when I say dominant, I mean could have been 3-0 up, didn't. You either score one or you don't score any, so you go in 1-0 up or 0-0 at half time. And the longer then the second half goes on, whether that scoreline is the same, the other teams have just come back into the game a lot more, come at us a lot more, and then they realize there's opportunities for them, and the game dynamic completely changes. Problem is, we should and could have put those games to bed had we done better with what we were doing. When I say we were dominant in those first half periods, I'm not being biased or anything like that. It's total control. The Cardiff game at home, we went 1-0 up, but not creating necessarily the chances and opportunities to get into the final third and not doing enough with it. So I guess when you say dominant, I guess, asterisks next to it. But this is what I mean. This is what our problem has been. We're not taking advantage of us being a team in control of the match. And then the longer you into the game with that sort of situation, I think the other team comes alive. But teams are coming down with that game plan, knowing if they can get to 60, 70 minutes, and then they can turn up, they can raise their energy levels against us. There's always a chance. That's what Millwall did, and they won. That's what Bristol did. I think they drew, and Stoke also drew, but came back into the game a lot more. Probably lucky to not lose both of those games in the end, even though we should have been out of sight, if that makes sense. So on the balance of the 90 minutes, it was fine, but they probably left the game thinking, oh, we could have got something more there, as much as we are thinking, why didn't we just close the game off in the first half? So that's what the story has been. So I guess that home form is a little bit misleading because we haven't necessarily played bad. We've been playing quite good, actually, at home and come out of our shell a little bit more. But I think the way the team's set up against us at home is different to how they might set up when they are at home. We will try and do the same thing, but perhaps it's a bit more open for us to exploit space better, so we can create them chances a bit easier in an away match than we can in a home match when they're sitting deep. I don't necessarily think Sunderland will sit deep when you come down to us, but we'll see what happens.
Looking at your position in the table, you said before you're ninth. We've spoken previous years about how Swansea have hit like an apathy in the sense that you're too good to be relegated, but you're kind of sniffing around 15th, 16th, but you're probably not good enough to mount a promotion push or a playoff push. At the minute, you're 5 points off the playoffs and 10 points away from relegation. That's not mid-table like we've spoke about in the past. That's much closer to playoffs and quite a decent way away from relegation, although it is the Championship. But does it feel like Swansea are like finally capable of at least making a challenge for like the top 8 or maybe even the top 6?
Yeah, in all honesty, I think we are not that far off currently. And I'm surprised that I'm saying this, to be honest. But I don't think we are that far off being a playoff contending team. And that could happen in the second half of the season, depending on how January goes and, your momentum and your luck with a bit of form. Someone always sneaks up, doesn't it? It could be us. I'm not saying it will be, but it wouldn't shock me if that is us this season. All those things I've already spoke about, if they can click into place and we could put 90 minutes together where we are consistently being creative enough and scoring the chances that we do make, and we do return to our little bit more stable defence that we showed earlier in the season. If they all click together for a bit of a period that maybe comes at the right time of year, in like February, March, maybe that happens with a couple more signings in January. I think we're a bit ahead of schedule. I wouldn't necessarily say I was expecting that this season. Luke Williams obviously come in January, and this is his first full season, so we were always expected it to be a transition. But we've also just had a takeover as well. So there's a lot of good news, I guess, going in the club and around the club. I say takeover. Our chairman, who was in place by the previous owners, has bought out the owners with a smaller team himself, who they were kind of all involved in the club already, but they've bought out the two majority holders who had caused a lot of discontent since they took over when we were in the Premier League. And there's been disharmony within the fan base towards them. And, people have wanted them gone for a long time. They've now gone. Too early to sort of tell what change will come. They've spoken a good game, as they always do. Credited in the fact that the balance between the fans and the ownership wasn't in a good place. Something they want to fix. I'm positive and hopeful that will happen. But also a little bit of me is a bit like, well, they were brought in by the old owners. So let's just wait and see if anything does actually change, or if it's just a sideways passing of the baton. Do you know what I mean? I don't necessarily think that will be the case. I'm hoping for the best, but we'll see. But that's created a bit of positivity and I think good momentum. in the right direction, and the results on the pitch and the performances and sort of building the tactics and the play style of all going hand in hand. I do think it maybe take a little bit more time, but yeah, I'm a bit surprised actually to be finding ourselves in top half, ninth, I guess, where we are so close to the playoffs. I thought we'd be not that much lower, but kind of around where we finished last year, where you just mentioned, I guess, around 14, 15, something like that.
And at the manager, I'm not going to lie, I don't know a great deal about him apart from he did quite well at Notts County and he said something cool about short corners when he was there. That's the maximum I know.
Video,
but
yeah.
yeah, if you haven't seen it, it's quite funny. It explains it quite well. But it's approaching like a year since he was appointed. If you take him the entire year, he's won 16, drawn 18, lost 18. I don't know whether you should take him the whole year. As you said, it's transition. And last season he comes in and Swansea were in, not a mess, but they weren't in the best place. But does it feel like after the year you've had with him, and things you've seen, the evidence you have, that he's the man that will take you where you ultimately want to be?
I think the goal for Swansea is to redevelop the Swansea way and to progress on the back of that. We want to do things a bit different in our own way, like we did before. A little bit, I think we get stuck in the cycle of chasing past success. Don't always agree with that being the out and out goal, but ultimately that's what the fans want. That's what they're trying to do. Part of that is bringing in young managers who want to play this sort of philosophy and learn and progress themselves and build their career up, which is always catch-22 because when it does go well for them, they end up moving on. It always happens, of course. But until that moment, the idea is if they do that and get poached, they've done a good job, haven't they? So they got us into a better place, I guess is the idea. And Luke Williams does fit into that mould and that category. He was Russell Martin's assistant when Russell Martin was here. So much of what you see is akin to what Martin did, probably not as extreme, which is perhaps more sensible when it comes to like the defending side and that sort of thing. I think Martin's is in a very extreme possession-based system, and if you look how they're getting on in the Premier League at the moment, maybe it does need to be tweaked. But yeah, so Luke Williams, I wouldn't say he's the finished product at all. I've had frustrations with him, but he has addressed them. Given a bit of time, he does address things, which is all you can ask for. I'm more than happy and willing to be patient and give him more time, even if that's a few years, as long as you can see the progress and see it going in the right direction, and you can see that he's learning and moving up as a manager himself. Because like you said, he came from Notts County. They just got promoted as well. So he's gone from non-league to League Two, and he had half a season in League Two before coming to the Championship. And in League Two, Notts County were very, very not good at defending. They just, for much of that season, were scoring more goals. That one more goal than you sort of thing philosophy. I think towards the end, before he came to us, they got into a bit of a bad spell, which you'd expect. Okay, they were doing well in that league considering they just got promoted. I'm not trying to shut them down at all, but that was a concern from their fans, how much they were conceding. So the fact that we've come here and we're not conceding nowhere near that sort of level shows that he's able to adapt and learn and change things. And I think that's where earlier this season, where maybe focused a bit too much on that side, and then we weren't scoring so much because, again, one of what he was known for at Notts County was how many goals they were scoring as well as conceding. So we weren't necessarily seeing that bit. So he's obviously trying to get the balance and learn. And like I said, as long as he can continue to do that, show that it's changing and developing and the club's moving in the right direction, I'm more than happy to give him time to learn because he is a young manager. He has taken a few steps up in terms of league and level. So it's not going to happen overnight in one season where we hit the top of the game. And I think, to be fair, in terms of a club pushing for promotion, I think you're in a better place if you can. If it does end up in a promotion, but off the back of 3 seasons of constant progress, I think you get into the Premier League in a better place than if you have that one season where you kind of just hit the form and the momentum's there from day one and you just go up a bit surprisingly. I think you struggle a bit more then in the next season. It's probably a better way to build anyway, if we can give him a bit of time.
You touched before about how you felt you're maybe a bit ahead of schedule at the time of speaking. And I feel like I asked this question to a lot of fans on the previous show, but it's mainly because I feel so many clubs are in a transition in some shape, size, or form. But and I know you can't speak for every Swansea fan, but what would success be for Swansea this season? If you finished in a specific position, you could go, that's success. And I know there's a couple of positions that can change it into being not a success, but for you, what would be the success or a successful season for Swansea?
If you're being honest, I think at the start of the season, we would have been happy to have a stable season. Because last year we had three managers, one of them was a caretaker. We were playing around with relegation a little bit. I don't think we, when in hindsight, you could probably say we probably weren't really ever in that threat, but we were always on the cusp of being dragged into that. And you always get worried when you're that close, yeah. We did drag ourselves out of it and looked comfortable by the end. But I think not having that worry for a full season and finishing somewhere in the mid-table, that was kind of the expectation. Now, I think we've had a couple of good performances and shown there's glimmers of doing better. So when we draw the two games we just drawn or don't win some of the games that we haven't won, I think some of the fans are getting frustrated, but that always happens. Ultimately, if the season finished now in ninth place, I don't think any Swansea fan can complain. They still would, but they shouldn't. I think it's a good stepping stone at the moment. We're going in the right direction. So yeah, anywhere where we are now would be a positive season for us. I think most fans, being honest, would have said that at the start of the season. They just probably have a little bit of a moan about it now because of how close we are to that gap between us and the playoffs. It looks like it's achievable and in reach. And we're in that sort of stage where I think, it's 5 points. So fans start getting excited that we can try and achieve that now. Do you know what I mean? So the expectations kind of changing, maybe a bit unfairly, but that's just because that's what football fans are like, I guess. And I'm not trying to criticize anyone, but that's all part of the fun, I guess, isn't it?
No, we're the same. I would have snapped your hand off for fourth at this point in the season, but now I'm like, we're behind Leeds and Sheffield United by so many points. Oh, the automatic dream was on. In reality, if we finish fourth at the end of the season, I'll snap your hand off again. But there's frustration. We're football fans. We live in the moment. It's kind of the fun of it, isn't it? You brought in a good portion of players last summer, but also a good portion of players went out. Those not massive turnover, not League One levels of turnover, as people will remember, but turnover. Who's been the most impressive summer signings that have came in?
So Lawrence Vigouroux in goals has come in and he's been quite impressive. You mentioned our defence earlier in the season. He's been a big part of that being good. He's made some top saves. He's commanding of the area, like in corners and stuff, and free kicks and set pieces. There's been a few mistakes, but I think every keeper has one or two, where someone goes up for a head and they don't quite catch it. But generally speaking, he's a comfortable pair of hands. Perhaps we haven't seen that sort of goalkeeping for a while down here. Who, he will just shout, "It's mine," jump and grab the ball. And I think that relieves so much pressure from your defence. It just allows him to play with that little bit more confidence, I guess, and not so much worry at the back. And he's also made some really important saves. Again, I was alluding earlier to how perhaps teams haven't been as clinical as they should have been with some of the chances we conceded earlier in the season. And he was a big part of them not scoring some of those chances, which you think, very good save from his perspective, but they probably should have scored, sort of thing. So he's been good. The other one I want to probably highlight is Gonzalo Franco's coming from Portuguese Premier League team. I can't remember the team off the top of my head. Probably can't say it either. So I'm sure you can find that on Google. But yeah, he's playing in the Portuguese Premier League. He's touted to go to one of the top three sides there. Been sort of scouted around, I think, for recent years. But somehow we managed to get him on quite it says undisclosed, but I'm pretty sure it was quite a tidy fee, not that much really. Bit of a bargain. And he's been very good in the centre of the park. He complements Matt Grimes, which is really important for us because I think one of the big criticisms last year was Jay Felton, who was playing with Matt Grimes. Not knocking Jay Felton because I think he's a good player, but perhaps there was something missing in regards to transitioning forward correctly, and then the balance between those two wasn't quite what we needed the way we were trying to play. And Franco's come in and he is just everywhere. I call him like a little Jack Russell because he's just running at players, breaking up play, making the interceptions, getting his foot stuck in, making a tackle, or if he doesn't make the tackle, disrupting the rhythm of the opposition so then someone else can make the tackle. Just being annoying, a nuisance in the middle, full of energy. And he's good on the ball as well. So then when we do win the ball back, he's competent in that department too and pushes on forward sometimes when we need him to. So he's been a very good addition. I think he creates a bit better balance in that midfield. especially from a defensive perspective, because we do like to try and press. If we lose the ball, one thing we try and do is get it back quickly. Obviously, if that doesn't happen, we'll get back into shape. But the first thing is, depending on where we are on the pitch and the players we've got around, they'll try and swarm you to get the ball back quickly. And he's a massive part of that because that's the brain he has. He's got the footballer brain of just being that nuisance in defence. But yeah, so he's one to watch out for as well. He didn't start midweek, so I'd expect him to start on the weekend. So they're probably the two that have stood out from the summer signings. The other one I would have normally mentioned would have been Ji-sung, but he's been out for like a couple of months with injury and he's only just come back. So he looked bright at the beginning of the season. He's a winger that's come in from South Korea. Probably a little bit lightweight and learning the sort of physicality of the championship, which he's admitted himself. And now he's come back from injury. He's probably taken a bit of a step back in that department. But, you know, he'll be around the game. Whether he starts or comes off the bench, he'll be involved. So it's whether he's back up to speed to perhaps be a bit of a nuisance yet. I'm not sure if he's quite there, but one to watch out for maybe if he does get up to speed.
Looking at Sunderland, like I said before, we're in fourth, but we want a run of one win, and I think it's 8. Which doesn't sound great, but we've also only lost 1 in those 8 as well. So we're kind of in a weird position where we started really well, we've dropped off a little bit, but I think we're 5 points clear of 7th place with Middlesbrough, so we're comfortable in a playoff position. Obviously, we flew out the traps at the start of the season. I think everyone saw what we were like at the beginning. We've levelled off a little bit without falling away completely. What have you made of Sunderland at the start of the season? And do you see Sunderland as a side that would maintain, not necessarily automatic, but just a promotion push this season?
I was actually quite impressed with them. I watched a few of the TV games that were on earlier in the year. I can't recall which actually, was it Leeds one? And was it you, the keeper made the howler and you had a...
It certainly was.
Yeah. So I watched that game. I think the result was probably fair in the end, even if it came in the way that was maybe not, from a Leeds perspective, ideal. But I've been impressed. I was not expecting you to be where you are. I'm not saying you wouldn't have been knocking on playoffs, but I know you've slipped down the last few games, but you were leading for quite a lot of this season. And I was surprised, to be honest, especially with the managerial roundabout you've had recently. And it didn't work out the last guy. Was it Beale that came in? Didn't quite work.
Didn't work out would be an understatement, but every time I think of his name, I feel a bit sick. So we'll just move on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm surprised that now he's gone. Someone else coming in the summer. That it's just, well, it's gone the way that it's gone. And I know you've got a lot of youth involved in your team. And I think that's a really good example for other teams to show that sometimes you just need to put them on the pitch and give them a chance. I do think we're a bit hesitant ourselves to do that. And I look at the way that you've integrated your youth and a little bit envious, I guess, because I do think we got some talent worth trying to develop and integrate in the first team. And we're in a position where our depth is not where it needs to be. And you just ask the question sometimes why we are not just trying to develop some of these youngsters instead of signing the likes of Cyrus Christie on a free transfer after the transfer window's finished. And he's coming off the bench, you know, just to play 20 minutes a game, just to give our fullbacks a rest. Surely there's someone that we can just bring in from the from the youth academy and try and see if there's someone that we can develop. Maybe there won't be, but I don't necessarily think Cyrus Christie's on the pace either. Do you know what I mean? So that's frustrating from our perspective. So watching a team who's doing that so well, and you were looking at kind of like world beaters at one stage this season. Fair play, I think, yeah, really good start. Whether you can maintain it, I think that youth in your team is also the challenge. Can as the season goes on, do they have the legs? Do they have the experience to maintain that level of output? If they don't, I don't necessarily think it's a negative because it's all learning and experience, and you're only going to be better off for it, like next season, for example, if you manage to keep them all, I guess. But yeah, I do think it's been a really positive start and surprised where Sunderland are at the moment.
If you could take one player from Sunderland's team to fit into the Swansea's, doesn't need to be our best player, just a player you think would fit in, who would be the player you'd take and why would you take him?
I think Job Bellingham, just because we are desperate for somebody to play behind the striker and cause a bit of trouble. We got Liam Cullen doing it at the moment, and to be fair, he stepped into that role quite well recently since the Wales international break, where he had a very good performance, scored 2 and assisted 2 to help us win the Nation League group. He's come back, brought that form with him. So he has been good, but I think he's in and out of games quite a lot. He's not always the focal attacking threat, and sometimes he's just kind of in the right place at the right time to get a goal, and that's a good trait. But I just think we need someone with a bit more presence in that number 10 role, who the teams know is a problem. We can attack through the middle and not have to rely going out wide, which is our preference at the moment. And somebody that will pick up goals from that number 10 position as well. So I think someone like him would be a really good addition to Swansea at the moment.
I feel like I'm going to predict a draw. I'm going to go with a 0-0, similar to last year, but only because I hate going to Swansea, because I feel like since we beat you 4-2, when Defoe scored a hat-trick and at least 3 of the goals were offside, we've had no look at Swansea. So I don't like going to Swansea. I think we need to win in terms of keeping the distance between ourselves and 7th place and 8th place, which is quite tight to be fair. But I just feel like this is going to be another pain in the arse draw. I'm going to go for 0-0, which I'm not really enthused by, but that's my prediction. What's yours, mate?
I think draw is fair as well, to be honest. And I'm more frustrated because of the Luton and Portsmouth game, because then I would say this is a good draw. But this is what I mean. I'd probably be in a bit like getting ahead of ourselves because of our position. If you asked me earlier in the season, there wouldn't be so much of an issue. But 1-1, I think, is potentially on the cards. It wouldn't shock me to either go 1-0 down and after you probably hold on to that for 90 minutes and we try and get a goal and manage to get one, or the other way around where we go 1-0 up and then you come out at us and we can't deal with that, because that's often the other way that it happens, and concede a late goal. So one or the other, I think, will happen and it'll probably end up as a draw. So I'm going to go 1-1.
Luke, thanks for joining us as always, mate. I hope you get better soon. I hope I get better soon. I hope we all get better soon and have a good Christmas. If I don't speak to you beforehand, mate, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and get well soon yourself, and I'm sure we'll all be ready for Christmas. Maybe it'll be a good time to get it now, because we've got, 10 days, 12 days to go. So 2 weeks to fix ourselves up. Hopefully means we'll be clean for that week.
Clean would not be the word I would use for Christmas, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.